insignificant detail let us investigate a crime. The sum of small things helps to reveal all the secrets. There is nothing more important in an investigation than details. Based on my 45 years as a detective, I'll tell you how we investigated crimes in the past. Without special equipment, cameras, and lots of databases. We relied solely on intuition, experience, and carefully gathered evidence to uncover the truth. Hi everyone. Detective Lefebre speaks. St. Clair, a coastal town perched on Nova Scotia's cliffs, was a place of stark contrasts, its beauty shadowed by economic struggles. The pride of the town was the newly built Maritime Observatory, a modern facility designed to monitor Atlantic storms. Funded by philanthropist Gerald McAllister, it symbolized progress and hope for a community grappling with fading fortunes. But the observatory's promise was shattered one October night when a fire consumed it, leaving the town with not just devastation but questions that would haunt them for years. Joel Dunbar, a 27-year-old engineering genius, had always stood out in St. Clair. Brilliant yet withdrawn, he was respected but feared for his intensity. Joel's life was shaped by hardship. His father's gambling debts had cost his family their home, foreclosed by none other than McAllister. This betrayal planted a seed of resentment that grew into a simmering grudge. Hired as a junior engineer during the observatory's construction, Joel quickly made a name for himself. But a dispute with the foreman led to his dismissal, a blow that he perceived as a personal attack. Quietly, he began plotting his revenge, leveraging his knowledge of the facility to orchestrate its destruction. On a foggy October night, flames erupted at the observatory, consuming it with unnatural speed. Residents awoke to the sight of the fire lighting up the cliffs, its glow visible for miles. The building collapsed in hours, leaving behind smoldering ruins and the charred remains of a man, later identified as Jimmy Cormick, a local drifter. The fire's intensity and the discovery of Jimmy's body transformed the incident from a tragedy to a potential crime. Early investigations suggested arson, with evidence of a tampered fuse box and traces of a rare accelerant. The town, reeling from the loss, demanded answers. The fire's deliberate nature pointed to someone with technical expertise. Suspicion quickly fell on Joel, whose bitterness and knowledge of the observatory made him a likely suspect. However, Joel's alibi, a poker game with friends, complicated the case. The discovery of $500 and a cryptic note in Jimmy's possession, instructing him to meet at the observatory with tools, hinted at a larger scheme. As the investigation deepened, St. Clair braced for the truth, knowing it would change the town forever. In any investigation, the first step is to identify those with the means, motive, and opportunity to commit the crime. In this case, the technical precision required to sabotage the fuse box immediately narrowed the field. The arsonist wasn't an amateur. They were someone with advanced knowledge of electrical systems. Joel Dunbar's name surfaced quickly. A prodigy in engineering, Joel had been involved in the observatory's construction before being dismissed under contentious circumstances. His expertise made him an obvious candidate, and his dismissal provided a potential motive. Still, suspicion alone wasn't enough. I arranged to meet Joel at his workshop, a modest building tucked away on the outskirts of town. He greeted me with a calm demeanor, his sharp blue eyes betraying no emotion. We spoke at length about his time on the project and his dismissal. Joel shrugged it off, calling it a professional disagreement, and insisting there were no hard feelings. His words were measured, his tone even, but there was an underlying tension, a quiet fury he couldn't entirely mask. When I asked about his whereabouts on the night of the fire, Joel provided an alibi. He had been at a poker game with friends. To my frustration, his alibi checked out. 3 witnesses corroborated his story, leaving me without immediate grounds to pursue him further. Despite his cooperative demeanor, I couldn't shake the feeling that Joel knew more than he was letting on. His brilliance and precision, coupled with his hidden anger, made him a compelling suspect. I decided to keep a close eye on him as the investigation continued, certain that his calm exterior was hiding something far more dangerous. Jimmy Cormick was one of St. Clair's invisible men, the kind of figure everyone recognized but few really knew. He had drifted into town several years earlier, surviving on odd jobs and the occasional act of charity from locals. Jimmy was a hard worker, but his transient nature meant he had no close ties or steady employment. He was a man who lived in the shadows, always one step away from disappearing entirely. The discovery of Jimmy's body in the ruins of the observatory turned the arson investigation into something much darker. Jimmy had no known connection to the facility, making his presence there on the night of the fire a mystery. Why had he been in a building that, under normal circumstances, he would have no reason to enter? A search of Jimmy's small apartment provided the first clue. Amid the clutter of his meager belongings, I found a crumpled envelope containing $500 in cash, more money than Jimmy had likely seen in months. Alongside the cash was a single typed note. "Meet me at the observatory, midnight. Bring your tools." The note, though typed, was damning. It suggested that Jimmy had been summoned to the scene, likely under false pretenses. But who had written it, and why? The phrasing implied that whoever called Jimmy there knew him well enough to appeal to his skills. "Bring your tools" indicated a task, a specific job that Jimmy had been asked to perform. Jimmy's death raised troubling possibilities. Had he been coerced into assisting with the arson, only to be silenced afterward? Or was he an unwitting victim, caught in a trap he didn't see coming? The cash hinted at a premeditated setup, but the answers lay in uncovering the identity of the person who had sent the note. The breakthrough came when I turned my attention to the accelerant used to start the fire. It wasn't a common fuel. It was a specialized chemical compound used primarily in industrial applications. Its properties made it ideal for arson. It burned hot and fast, ensuring maximum destruction in a short period. Obtaining such a compound wasn't easy. It wasn't something that could be bought over the counter. It required connections to specific industrial suppliers. I began contacting every distributor within a 100-mile radius, inquiring about recent sales of the compound. After several dead ends, I finally found a lead. A small lab in St. Clair had sold a batch of the accelerant just weeks before the fire. The purchase details were suspicious. The buyer had used a forged ID, and while the name on the paperwork was fake, the signature was not. When I compared the signature to Joel Dunbar's known handwriting, the match was unmistakable. This discovery was a turning point. It placed Joel in direct connection with the accelerant used in the arson, linking him to the fire in a way that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. With this evidence in hand, I obtained a warrant to search Joel's workshop. The building, located on the outskirts of St. Clair, was a small but meticulously organized space. Inside, I found the tools of Joel's trade, drafting equipment, engineering blueprints, and an array of electrical components. At first glance, it seemed like the workspace of a dedicated inventor. But a closer inspection revealed something far more sinister. In a locked cabinet, I found detailed blueprints of the St. Clair Maritime Observatory. The plans were marked with specific ignition points, highlighting the precise locations where accelerants could be placed to maximize the fire's spread. Next to the blueprints was a small cache of the same accelerant used in the arson, its containers bearing labels from the supplier I had contacted. The most damning piece of evidence, however, was a burner phone hidden in a drawer. The phone logs revealed multiple calls to Jimmy Cormick in the days leading up to the fire. Cross-referencing these logs with Jimmy's known timeline confirmed that Joel had been in contact with him shortly before the incident. When I confronted Joel with the evidence, he didn't react as most suspects would. There was no panic, no outburst of denial. Instead, he maintained his calm demeanor, insisting that the accelerant was for a private experiment unrelated to the fire. He claimed the blueprints were remnants from his work on the observatory project and had no malicious intent. His explanations were plausible enough to create doubt, but failed to account for the burner phone or the note that lured Jimmy to his death. To understand Joel's actions, I had to delve into his past. What I uncovered was a story of ambition, resentment, and a grudge that had simmered for years. Joel's family had been prosperous once, but his father's gambling addiction had led to financial ruin. The final blow came when Gerald McAllister, the philanthropist behind the observatory, foreclosed on the Dunbar family home. For Joel, this was more than a financial loss. It was a personal betrayal, a humiliation that he carried with him into adulthood. The observatory represented everything Joel despised. Funded by McAllister, It stood as a monument to wealth and power, a symbol of the man who had destroyed Joel's family. Joel's dismissal from the project only deepened his hatred, transforming it into a driving force for revenge. But revenge alone wasn't enough. Joel had also devised a way to profit from the crime. By destroying the observatory, he could not only strike at McAllister but also collect insurance money for stolen inventions from his workshop. It was a plan born of both anger and greed, executed with meticulous precision. Joel's plan was as complex as it was ruthless. He had used his technical expertise to ensure the fire would appear accidental, crafting a scenario that left little room for suspicion. The tampered fuse box, the strategically placed accelerant, and the timing of the fire all pointed to careful planning. Jimmy Cormick was the perfect pawn. A drifter with no strong ties, Jimmy was easy to manipulate. Joel had approached him under the guise of needing help, offering $500, a sum too tempting for someone in Jimmy's position to refuse. The note and cash were bait, drawing Jimmy to the observatory on the night of the fire. What Jimmy didn't realize was that he was being set up. Whether Joel had intended to kill Jimmy from the start or decided to eliminate him later as a loose end remained unclear. What was certain was that Joel had used Jimmy's presence to muddy the waters of the investigation, creating a layer of misdirection that almost succeeded. The discovery of the burner phone and the paper trail linking Joel to the accelerant unraveled his carefully constructed alibi. The evidence painted a picture of a man who had turned his genius into a weapon, using it to exact revenge and satisfy his greed. The burner phone found in Joel's workshop was a critical piece of evidence. Its logs revealed a series of calls made to Jimmy Cormick in the week leading up to the fire, with the last call placed just hours before the blaze began. The content of the conversations wasn't recorded, but the timing and frequency of the calls were damning. It suggested that Joel had not only orchestrated Jimmy's presence at the observatory, but had been actively directing his actions. I traced the burner phone's purchase to a small electronics shop in St. Clair. Surveillance footage showed a man matching Joel's description buying the device just days before the call started. He had paid in cash and worn a baseball cap pulled low over his face, but the clerk remembered him. Joel's piercing blue eyes were hard to forget. When confronted with this new evidence, Joel didn't waver. He admitted to buying the phone but claimed it was for private business dealings unrelated to the fire. His calm defiance only fueled my suspicion, and I knew I needed to dig deeper into his actions leading up to the crime. Piecing together the timeline of events on the night of the fire was like assembling a jigsaw puzzle. Witness statements placed Jimmy at the observatory just before midnight, as instructed in the note. Several locals reported seeing a figure matching Jimmy's description walking toward the facility with a bag of tools slung over his shoulder. Joel, meanwhile, maintained that he had been at a poker game with friends, a claim corroborated by 3 witnesses. However, subtle inconsistencies in their accounts began to surface. One friend recalled Joel stepping outside to take a phone call during the game, while another mentioned he seemed distracted throughout the evening. A closer look at phone records confirmed that Joel had made one final call from the burner phone at 11:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before the fire began. The call's recipient? Jimmy Cormick. Joel's plan extended beyond the fire itself. He had anticipated suspicion and prepared an elaborate defense. His poker alibi was carefully constructed, with each witness unwittingly coached to provide consistent details. The burner phone was meant to be disposable, its existence hidden from view. And his purchase of the accelerant had been masked by a forged identity, a layer of misdirection intended to divert attention. What Joel hadn't anticipated was the thoroughness of the investigation. The discovery of the forged signature on the accelerant purchase and the burner phone tied him directly to the crime, unraveling the careful web of deception he had woven. The search of his workshop revealed additional evidence of premeditation. Alongside the blueprints of the observatory, I found a series of handwritten notes detailing the timing and logistics of the arson. Joel had accounted for everything, from the fire's ignition to the likely response time of the fire department. He had even plotted multiple escape routes in case things went wrong. Jimmy Cormick's role in the plot became clearer as more evidence surfaced. He had been lured to the observatory with the promise of easy money, tasked with what he likely believed was a simple repair job. The $500 payment was substantial for someone in Jimmy's position, making it almost impossible for him to say no. However, Jimmy's presence at the scene wasn't just a means to an end. It was part of Joel's strategy. By placing Jimmy in the building at the time of the fire, Joel created a scapegoat. The drifter's reputation as a transient with no fixed purpose made him the perfect patsy, someone who could be easily dismissed or blamed for the crime. But Joel's plan had a fatal flaw. The note found in Jimmy's possession. Typed but precise, it hinted at orchestration. Combined with the evidence tying Joel to the accelerant and burner phone, the note revealed that Jimmy's involvement was no accident. The tragedy of Jimmy's death weighed heavily on me as the case unfolded. He had been a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing, a victim of Joel's calculated cruelty. While Joel's brilliance and cunning were undeniable, so too was his willingness to sacrifice others in his pursuit of vengeance and profit. As the walls closed in on Joel Dunbar, his carefully constructed facade began to crack. While he maintained his composure during initial questioning, the mounting evidence against him left him with fewer avenues of escape. Witness testimonies, burner phone records, and physical evidence from his workshop painted an incriminating picture, one that even Joel's brilliance couldn't entirely explain away. In the days following my discovery of his connection to the accelerant and the note that lured Jimmy Cormick to the observatory, Joel's behavior shifted. Normally precise and calculating, he began to make small but telling mistakes. He missed a scheduled meeting with his lawyer and was spotted late at night near the town's harbor, appearing tense and agitated. A surveillance operation confirmed my suspicions. Joel was preparing to flee. Investigators observed him gathering supplies, non-perishable food, camping equipment, and large amounts of cash. It was clear he intended to retreat to one of the safe houses detailed in his notes. Knowing time was of the essence, I obtained a warrant for his arrest. Tracking Joel to his chosen hideout was no easy task. His escape plan had been meticulously designed, with multiple false trails to confuse anyone following him. However, his movements were betrayed by his reliance on familiarity. He had retreated to a remote cabin in the woods, a place he had frequented as a child during family camping trips. The cabin was nestled deep within a dense forest, accessible only by a winding, overgrown trail. Arriving just before dawn, I led a small team to secure the area. The forest was silent, save for the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant call of an owl. As we approached the cabin, a faint light glowed from inside. A lantern burning on a table where Joel sat, scribbling furiously in a notebook. The moment he saw us, Joel froze. For a second, his calm demeanor returned, and he even offered a faint smile. "I wondered how long it would take you," he said, his voice steady. There was no attempt to resist as we cuffed him and led him away. To Joel, it seemed the game was already over, and he had lost. Yet, his lack of remorse was chilling. A man who knew he had crossed a line and accepted his fate without regret. Joel's trial began 6 months after his arrest, drawing national attention due to the complexity of the case and his own notoriety as a local prodigy turned criminal mastermind. The courtroom was packed with journalists, townsfolk, and those who had once admired Joel's brilliance. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of anticipation and unease, as the community sought both justice and closure. The prosecution's case was airtight, built on a mountain of evidence. The blueprints of the observatory, the tampered fuse box, the accelerant purchase, and the burner phone logs left no doubt about Joel's role in the crime. Testimonies from Jimmy Cormick's acquaintances and the witnesses who had seen Joel's truck near the observatory on the night of the fire further cemented the narrative of premeditated arson and murder. Joel's defense team argued that the fire had been an accident, claiming the accelerant and blueprints were unrelated to the incident. They portrayed Joel as a misunderstood genius, a victim of circumstance rather than a calculating arsonist. However, their argument crumbled under the weight of the evidence, particularly the damning link between Joel and the note that had lured Jimmy to his death. Throughout the trial, Joel remained composed, speaking only once during his sentencing. "I regret the collateral damage," he said, referencing Jimmy's death, "but I don't regret proving my point." His words sent a shiver through the courtroom, revealing a man who valued his vendetta over human life. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Joel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, his brilliant mind now confined to a cell. Part 20. The Aftermath. The conviction brought a sense of relief to the town of St. Clair, but the scars of Joel's actions lingered. The ruins of the observatory remained a stark reminder of the tragedy, its twisted steel frame standing as a silent monument to both progress and destruction. Gerald McAllister, devastated by the loss of his project, used the insurance payout to fund scholarships for local students, a gesture that transformed tragedy into opportunity. Jimmy Cormick's death weighed heavily on the community. A memorial was held in his honor, attended by many who had known him only in passing but were moved by his tragic role in the crime. Jimmy's story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of desperation and trust misplaced in the wrong hands. As for me, the case of Joel Dunbar remained etched in my memory as one of the most intricate and haunting I had ever solved. It was a stark reminder of the fine line between genius and madness, and the devastating consequences when brilliance is used as a weapon. St. Clair began to rebuild, its wounds slowly healing, but the shadow of the observatory fire would never fully fade. Joel Dunbar's incarceration began with little fanfare. He was transferred to a maximum security prison, where he would serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Yet, even behind bars, Joel's intellect couldn't be contained. Within months, he had gained a reputation among inmates and guards alike for his uncanny ability to solve problems, whether it was fixing a malfunctioning heating system or devising a way to streamline administrative processes for the prison staff. Despite his cooperation and seemingly calm demeanor, Joel remained a figure of intrigue and unease. Fellow inmates described him as detached, observing the world with the same calculating gaze that had unnerved investigators during the trial. He rarely spoke about the fire or his crimes, but on the rare occasions when he did, his comments were chillingly matter-of-fact. "I regret being caught, not what I did," he reportedly told a prison psychologist. "The observatory needed to burn. It was my masterpiece." Joel's presence in the prison system sparked debate among criminologists and psychologists. Was he a true sociopath, or a man driven to extremes by circumstance? His actions and attitude became the subject of academic papers and crime documentaries, ensuring that his name remained in public consciousness long after the trial. In the aftermath of the fire, the question of whether to rebuild the observatory became a polarizing issue in St. Clair. For some, the ruins were a painful reminder of the town's loss, while for others, they represented an opportunity to move forward. Gerald McAllister led the charge to rebuild, determined to honor the original vision of the observatory as a symbol of progress and resilience. The reconstruction project began 2 years after the fire, funded in part by McAllister's insurance payout and additional donations from regional organizations. This time, the project was overseen with painstaking attention to safety and security, ensuring that nothing like Joel's sabotage could happen again. The new observatory was designed with input from both scientists and the community. It retained the sleek, modern architecture of its predecessor but incorporated elements that honored the town's maritime heritage, such as a lighthouse-inspired tower. When it finally opened, the building was hailed as a triumph, a testament to St. Clair's ability to rise from the ashes. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, McAllister delivered a heartfelt speech. "This observatory is more than a building," he said. "It is a symbol of our community's resilience and determination to overcome even the darkest of times. We have not forgotten what was lost, but today, we look to the future." The case of Joel Dunbar remained a defining moment in my career as a detective. As the years passed, I often found myself revisiting the details, questioning what might have been done differently. Could Joel's path have been altered if someone had intervened earlier? Or was his descent into darkness inevitable, the product of a mind too brilliant and too embittered to be contained? One aspect that haunted me was Jimmy Cormick's role in the tragedy. He was a man whose only crime was trusting the wrong person, and yet he had paid the ultimate price. His death served as a reminder of how easily lives could be destroyed by forces beyond their control. Justice, in this case, felt both satisfying and incomplete. Joel was held accountable for his actions, but the scars he left on St. Clair ran deep. The fire had exposed not only the flaws in Joel's character, but also the vulnerabilities of a community that had placed so much trust in progress and symbols of success. For the people of St. Clair, the fire was more than a physical disaster. It was a psychological wound that took years to heal. Many residents struggled with feelings of betrayal and guilt. Joel Dunbar had been one of their own, a man whose brilliance had once been a source of pride. To learn that he had turned against the community was a bitter pill to swallow. Children who had witnessed the fire from the cliffs carried the memory into adulthood, their lives shaped by the eerie spectacle of flames consuming the town's symbol of hope. Families who had depended on the observatory for employment faced financial struggles, while local leaders grappled with the challenge of restoring faith in the town's future. Community support groups and counseling services played a crucial role in helping residents cope. Over time, the focus shifted from mourning what was lost to celebrating what had been rebuilt. The new observatory became a rallying point, drawing people together in a shared vision of resilience. Joel Dunbar's name remains etched in the history of St. Clair, a cautionary tale of genius turned to destruction. His story has been dissected in countless books, documentaries, and psychological studies, each offering its own interpretation of his motives and mindset. To some, he is a tragic figure, a man whose potential was wasted by bitterness and obsession. To others, he is a villain, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked intellect and ambition. For the people of St. Clair, Joel's legacy is both a shadow and a warning. His actions forced the community to confront its vulnerabilities, to question the blind trust placed in symbols of progress and individual brilliance. Yet, in the end, the town emerged stronger, its scars a testament to its resilience. As I close the file on Joel Dunbar's case, I am struck by the duality of his story. It is a tale of destruction and redemption, of loss and rebuilding, of a mind that could have shaped the world but instead chose to burn it down. St. Clair will never forget him, but neither will it let his actions define its future. The story of Joel Dunbar is as much about the town of St. Clair as it is about the man himself. It is a tale of ambition and obsession, of a community's resilience in the face of tragedy, and of the fine line between genius and madness. Through the flames and the shadows, the people of St. Clair found a way to rebuild, not just their observatory, but their sense of hope. If you like this story and want to watch more stories by Detective Lefebre, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below. Remember, the truth is in details.